On a warm June morning in 2025, the world watched as history took a breath. It wasn't announced with fanfare. There were no fireworks. No global headlines screamed the news immediately. But in the heart of Vatican City, inside the gilded walls of the Apostolic Palace, something extraordinary happened. And for those who understood the weight of the moment, priests, theologians, scholars, and the faithful, it was as if time itself stood still. Pope Leo XIV, standing before a small delegation of Orthodox leaders from Constantinople, took a step that had not been taken with such clarity in centuries. He didn't propose a merger. He didn't issue demands. What he offered was far more radical: open hands and a listening heart. A gesture not of domination, but of brotherhood. The unity of the body of Christ, he said, his voice steady and resonant, is not a theory. It is a call. And this generation must answer it. He wasn't reading from a dusty document. He wasn't simply repeating ecumenical niceties that had long become the wallpaper of church diplomacy. This was new. This was real. And it carried the unmistakable signature of a pope who has, from the beginning of his papacy, prioritized healing within the church, and healing between churches. A scene laden with symbolism. It was June 28, 2025, just one day before the feast of Saints Peter and Paul, the two great apostles whose martyrdoms are venerated both in the East and in the West. The date wasn't random. The feast is a tradition that ties together the founding fathers of Christianity, a shared anchor before the currents of history pulled east and west apart. And there they were, Orthodox bishops in full regalia, seated in quiet dignity alongside their Catholic counterparts. Between them, ancient icons and towering statues, incense smoke curling like a prayer rising to heaven. For a moment, the room held more than just people, it held the collective longing of over 900 years of division. Cameras flashed. Journalists leaned in. But Pope Leo XIV didn't raise his voice for effect. He wasn't there to perform. He was there to initiate. "We have misunderstood each other for too long," he said. "And, while wounds take time to heal, we cannot wait for perfect conditions. The time is now to build communion, not in words, but in prayer, practice, and partnership." What prompted this moment? To grasp the weight of Pope Leo's statement, you must understand how deep the divide between the Catholic and Orthodox churches truly runs. It is not a surface wound, it is a fracture carved by centuries of theological conflict, imperial politics, and mutual excommunications. And while many have spoken about unity, few have dared to suggest how it might actually happen. But Leo XIV has never been just another pope. From the moment of his election, he has been different. Compassionate yet doctrinally grounded, humble yet unshaken in vision. A man raised among the people, but trained in the intellectual and spiritual traditions of both Latin and Eastern Christianity. This move toward unity wasn't a reaction to pressure. It wasn't driven by politics. It was a deliberate choice, one forged through years of silent listening, private conversations, and careful discernment. And in truth, the signs were already there. A whisper becomes a voice. Earlier that same month, Pope Leo had addressed a theological symposium in Rome titled Nika and the Church of the Third Millennium. The name was a reference to the First Council of Nicaea, convened in 325 AD, where foundational doctrines of Christianity were debated and affirmed. It was also the council that originally set the date for the celebration of Easter, a detail that would become central to what the Pope proposed. At that event, Leo XIV made a quiet but shocking suggestion that the Catholic and Orthodox churches consider celebrating Easter on the same date. If we honor the same resurrection, he said, how can we justify different days? What message does that send to a broken world? Looking for a united witness? It was a moment that left the room in stunned silence. Shared Easter celebrations have been discussed before, most notably by St. John Paul II and Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, but they never gained traction. The complexity of calendars, the fear of yielding to the other side, and deep-rooted nationalism always stood in the way. But Pope Leo wasn't proposing negotiations. He was offering reverent surrender to a higher truth: Christ is one. His resurrection is one. His body, the Church, should be one. Beyond symbolism, the first real steps. Later that month, Leo XIV met with the delegation from the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, who had traveled to Rome for the feast day. This annual visit has been symbolic for decades, part of the long-standing tradition of sending representatives between the Vatican and the Fanner, the Orthodox headquarters in Istanbul. But this time, the conversations weren't just about goodwill. Sources within the Vatican have since confirmed that concrete proposals were laid on the table. Joint theological commissions will be reactivated with a specific mandate to move beyond theoretical dialogue and identify practical steps toward visible unity. These include local pastoral collaboration, Eucharistic sharing in special circumstances, shared liturgies during global Christian events, and most surprisingly, the creation of a joint statement on ecclesial primacy, the most divisive issue since the 11th century. We cannot rush this, the Pope admitted, but we must no longer crawl. One of the most important clarifications Pope Leo XIV made, and repeated several times, was this: unity is not uniformity. He emphasized that the Catholic Church is not seeking to absorb the Orthodox Church. There will be no erasure of Orthodox liturgies, no renunciation of traditions, no demand for a monolithic expression of faith. What we seek is not submission, he said, but communion. The kind of communion Christ prayed for, a unity that honors diversity within the embrace of truth. In other words, the goal is Eucharistic communion, a restoration of full fellowship in worship and sacraments, without requiring a full structural or cultural merger. A concept known in theological circles as unity in diversity. This is not a new idea, but it has never before been expressed with this level of papal authority, intentional clarity, and timely urgency. A pope for a time such as this. The reactions across the Catholic world were swift and wide-ranging. Some hailed Pope Leo as the bridge builder of the century. Others were cautious, especially in more conservative quarters, concerned about doctrinal compromise. Meanwhile, voices in the Orthodox world responded with curious silence, a silence that may reflect not dismissal, but contemplation. Whatever the reaction, one thing is clear: this is not just another ecumenical meeting. This is the beginning of a chapter that may one day be studied alongside the Council of Florence, the Edict of Milan, and the Second Vatican Council. And Leo XIV? He seems unmoved by the noise. Like a shepherd focused on the horizon, he walks slowly, purposefully, quietly. Because unity, he knows, doesn't begin with a decree. It begins with a decision, a decision to listen more than speak, to serve more than demand, to pray more than argue. And that's what makes this different. For the first time in centuries, the Catholic Church is not waiting for unity. It's walking toward it. If we are to understand how radical Pope Leo XIV's call truly is, we must first descend into the deep waters of history, where wounds were opened not just by disagreements, but by centuries of pride, empire, and pain. Because before the hand can be extended, it must know what broke it apart in the first place. The schism that shaped the world. The year was 1054. In a dramatic and tragic moment, a papal legate placed a bull of excommunication on the altar of the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. In return, the Patriarch of Constantinople excommunicated the envoy. Though this act did not instantly sever every bond between the Eastern and Western churches, it became the symbolic explosion point of centuries of tension. And it marked the beginning of what would be known as the Great Schism, a divide between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church that has lasted nearly a millennium. But this wasn't just a theological argument. It was a collision of worlds. The issues that separated East and West were many, and layered like sediment on the ocean floor. At the heart was a disagreement over authority. The Church of Rome believed the Pope, as successor to Peter, held universal jurisdiction over all Christendom. The Eastern churches, however, operated in a conciliar model, led by bishops and patriarchs, with no single man placed above the others. Then came the Filioque clause, a phrase added to the Nicene Creed in the Latin West, stating that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. The Eastern churches rejected this addition, not only on theological grounds but also as a violation of ecumenical council authority. There were also linguistic divides, Greek versus Latin, cultural differences, Byzantine versus Roman, and political pressures, Eastern emperors versus Western kings. It was as though two lungs of the same body had learned to breathe separately. After 1054, things didn't immediately crumble. There were moments of cooperation, especially during the Crusades. But these efforts often ended in betrayal and bloodshed. One of the most catastrophic wounds came in 1204, when Latin crusaders sacked Constantinople, a Christian city, during the Fourth Crusade. Churches were looted, sacred relics stolen, monasteries burned. The betrayal ran deep, and its echoes still shape Orthodox memory today. By then, the divide was no longer just theological. It was visceral. Trust had died. Attempts to reconcile, and why they failed. Yet even through all this, the longing for unity never completely disappeared. In 1274, the Second Council of Lyon tried to restore communion, but political motives overshadowed sincere reconciliation. Eastern delegates were often seen as pawns of the West. In 1439, the Council of Florence came even closer. Agreements were signed. Embraces were exchanged. For a moment, it seemed as though the body of Christ might begin to heal. But the people, especially in the East, rejected the terms. They saw it as capitulation. And the Union collapsed almost as soon as it was declared. The centuries rolled on. The West developed scholastic theology, centralized ecclesial power, and expanded its global reach through colonization and missionary work. The East, meanwhile, maintained mystical theology, spiritual discipline through the Jesus prayer, and a sense of theological continuity rooted in the early Church Fathers. And though both continued to profess the Nicene Creed, venerate the Virgin Mary, and celebrate sacraments, they remained apart. It wasn't until the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, that a significant change occurred. For the first time in modern Catholic history, the Church officially recognized that elements of sanctification and truth exist outside its visible structure. This opened the door to renewed ecumenical dialogue. In 1965, Pope Paul VI and Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras lifted the mutual excommunications of 1054. It was a moment of hope. Tears were shed, prayers offered. But the road ahead remained steep. Since then, every pope, from John Paul II to Benedict XVI to Francis, has spoken warmly of Orthodox relations. Meetings took place. Joint declarations signed. Shared concerns voiced. And yet, no visible communion was restored. Because despite goodwill, the obstacles remain daunting. The obstacles that remain. Let's be honest. Even in 2025, the path to unity is rocky. 1. Papal primacy. This is the core theological sticking point. Catholics believe in a universal, juridical authority of the Pope. Orthodox acknowledge the Pope as first among equals, but reject any supremacy over other patriarchs. 2. Doctrinal developments. Catholics have doctrines like the Immaculate Conception and Purgatory, which the Orthodox do not accept. Orthodox theology emphasizes mystery over explanation, making some Catholic dogmas appear overdefined. 3. Ecclesiology. The Orthodox Church is autocephalous, made up of national churches with their own governance. Catholics have a centralized magisterium, which the Orthodox fear could dominate a potential union. 4. Political entanglements. The Russian Orthodox Church, for example, has often aligned itself with political power structures, complicating ecumenical relations. War in Ukraine and other geopolitical conflicts place emotional and spiritual strain on conversations. 5. Nationalism and memory. Historic wounds like the 1204 sack of Constantinople are not easily forgotten. Each side has centuries of liturgical, cultural, and linguistic identity at stake. So what makes Pope Leo XIV's initiative different? What makes it worth paying attention to? Why now? Why him? Because timing, as always, is divine. The world is changing fast. Secularism is rising in both the East and West. Moral relativism challenges Christian orthodoxy. Persecution of Christians in many countries is growing. And the youth, disillusioned by division, are seeking authenticity and unity, not dogmatic turf wars. In this climate, Pope Leo XIV emerges not as a reformer, but as a reconciler. His background uniquely positions him for this moment. Born to a family with both Western and Eastern ancestry, he spent part of his seminary formation studying Orthodox theology. Fluent in Greek, a lover of icons, a student of St. Gregory Palamas as much as Thomas Aquinas. He speaks East and West, one theologian remarked, not just in language but in soul. And unlike efforts in the past that appeared top-down, political, or coercive, Leo XIV's approach is organic. He's not demanding unity. He's inviting communion. The first cracks in the wall. Already, his words are bearing fruit. A joint liturgy of intercessory prayer for unity is scheduled in Thessaloniki this fall. Catholic and Orthodox seminarians will soon participate in shared retreats across Italy, Greece, and Romania. A document outlining mutual theological convergence on the Eucharist and sacraments is being reviewed by both churches' commissions. And there are unconfirmed reports that the idea of shared Easter is being formally studied by a small, secret commission, something that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. This is no longer about tolerance, said a Vatican official. This is about co-pilgrimage. Unity doesn't mean surrender. Some Catholics and Orthodox faithful are nervous. And understandably so. They fear that unity might mean the loss of identity, of liturgy, music, vestments, architecture, spirituality. But Leo XIV has been clear. We do not seek to melt down our traditions into a bland mixture. We seek to bring them to the same table. That's not dilution. That's divine diversity. Unity doesn't erase beauty. It magnifies it. Unity doesn't flatten truth. It helps it shine from every angle. Unity doesn't deny difference. It dignifies it in the light of love. The path remains long. There will be setbacks. Some bishops will resist. Political pressures may interfere. Cultural fears will rise. Accusations of betrayal will surely come. But something has changed. Something real. For the first time in a generation, the Church is not looking backward. It's looking across the divide, with open eyes and an open heart. And in the middle of that ancient chasm, Pope Leo XIV has placed something no one expected: a bridge. There are speeches, and then there are moments when history echoes in the room. Pope Leo XIV's address at the Nika and the Church of the Third Millennium Symposium was the latter. Held in Rome earlier in June 2025, the symposium gathered theologians, church historians, and ecumenical observers from around the world. Many expected a formal keynote. Few expected a turning point. But Leo XIV, true to form, didn't deliver a lecture. He gave a vision, one rooted not just in doctrine, but in divine invitation. The Church is not a fortress to defend, he began, but a table to extend. Christ built no walls, he broke them. He drew all to himself. And now we must do the same. The Pope's use of the term, Nika, the Greek word for victory, was intentional. It referenced the First Council of Nicaea, 325 AD, the moment in history when the early Christian Church gathered to articulate its core beliefs. Catholic and Orthodox Christians both looked to Nicaea as a foundation. They affirmed the Nicene Creed. They celebrate the same sacraments. They honor the same saints for the first millennium of Christianity. This shared ancestry isn't hypothetical, it's historical. So Pope Leo asked a daring question. If we have the same spiritual DNA, why have we lived as strangers for so long? His voice carried weight, but not aggression. It was filled with lament, not lecture. He wasn't wagging fingers, he was holding out a hand. Then came the moment that made headlines around the world. I propose, the Pope said, that we take the first visible step toward unity by agreeing, together, to celebrate Easter on the same day. In 2027, the room went silent. Some scribbled notes. Others sat stunned. A few blinked back tears. Because Easter, the holiest day in Christianity, is still celebrated on different dates by Catholics and Orthodox due to calendar differences. The Western Church uses the Gregorian calendar, while most Eastern churches still follow the Julian calendar, which places Easter up to 5 weeks later in some years. For over 50 years, theologians have floated the idea of a shared Easter. But until now it remained just that, an idea. With this statement, Pope Leo XIV turned it into a proposal. And not just any proposal, a proposal rooted in the authority of the First Ecumenical Council, the one that set the date for Easter in the first place. By referencing Nicaea, the Pope wasn't asking for novelty. He was asking for fidelity. Let us return not just to the text of Nicaea, he said, but to its spirit, where the Church spoke as one voice. To the untrained eye, aligning Easter dates might seem trivial. But in spiritual and symbolic terms, it's monumental. 1. A visible sign of communion. Millions of Christians across East and West, rising in the same dawn light to proclaim, Christ is risen! That would speak louder than any document ever could. 2. A reclaiming of unity. Instead of each church waiting for the other to make the first move, they take a step together, in humility and grace. 3. A global witness. In an age when Christianity is often caricatured as divided, this unity would show the world a different face, a reconciled one. 4. A pastoral blessing. Families of mixed traditions would finally celebrate together. Pilgrimages, missions, and interchurch marriages would carry less tension. As Leo XIV put it, unity is not a negotiation. It is a resurrection. What the Pope didn't say, and why that matters. Perhaps the most telling part of Pope Leo XIV's vision is what he didn't say. He didn't demand orthodoxy to accept papal supremacy. He didn't present a list of theological non-negotiables. He didn't even mention doctrinal authority. Instead, he spoke the language of love, hope, and shared holiness. "The question is not, who is right," he said, "but are we ready to walk together again?" This was not weakness. It was strength cloaked in humility. Because real authority doesn't need to assert itself. It knows how to invite steps toward real communion. Behind the scenes, the Vatican has already begun charting a roadmap. According to internal reports, Pope Leo has authorized the dicastery for promoting Christian unity to establish a special task force with 3 goals. 1. Theological convergence. Update the 2007 Ravenna document with further clarity on synodality, papal primacy, and conciliar models of governance. Identify core doctrines held in common versus those that require deeper discussion. 2. Liturgical collaboration. Begin joint Vespers, feast days, and Marian processions in select dioceses and Orthodox parishes open to participation. Develop a shared lectionary calendar for Holy Week by 2026. 3. Pastoral outreach. Encourage Orthodox and Catholic bishops and diaspora communities, e.g., in North America, Australia, to issue joint pastoral letters. Launch ecumenical pilgrimage sites across the Mediterranean and Holy Land. These aren't vague goals. They're measurable, localized, and centered on relationship building, not assimilation. Communion versus absorption. Throughout all of this, the Pope continues to hammer home one key distinction. We do not seek to absorb. We seek to embrace. This message resonates deeply, especially among Orthodox leaders who fear being treated as a junior partner in any unification. Orthodox worship is richly mystical. Their bishops lead ancient sees like Antioch, Alexandria, and Constantinople. Their liturgies, sung in ancient languages, are considered windows into eternity. Pope Leo has made clear that Rome does not seek to erase this beauty, but to walk beside it. So how has the Orthodox world responded? Cautiously, quietly, but not negatively. The Ecumenical Patriarchate has released a short statement affirming its openness to dialogue and gratitude for His Holiness' fraternal gestures. Metropolitan John of Pergamon, a leading Orthodox theologian, spoke of a new climate of trust. Some national Orthodox churches, especially those entangled in political complications, have remained silent. But insiders say this is less resistance and more discernment. Even in silence, hearts may be softening. Beyond hierarchy and documents, there's another voice rising in this moment: the laity. On social media, Orthodox and Catholic young people have begun sharing videos with the hashtag #SharedEaster. In cities like Paris, Chicago, and Melbourne, local ecumenical prayer gatherings are doubling in size. A viral TikTok by a Catholic convert to Orthodoxy, captioned, "Imagine celebrating Pacha together," reached over 3 million views. Unity isn't just a diplomatic goal anymore. It's becoming a grassroots longing. As one young Orthodox woman in Serbia posted, "I'm not afraid of losing tradition. I'm afraid of losing brothers and sisters who love the same Jesus." There's something deeply prophetic about what Pope Leo is doing. Not prophetic in the apocalyptic sense, but in the biblical one. Prophets don't predict. They point. They provoke. They prepare the way. Like John the Baptist crying in the wilderness. Like Isaiah dreaming of swords turned to plowshares. Like Jesus praying, "Father, may they be one, as we are one." Pope Leo isn't solving everything. But he's daring us to see everything differently. To imagine unity not as a political contract, but as a spiritual reunion. Not as an ecclesial deal, but as a divine gift. Not as a dream deferred, but as a table being set. The weight of the moment. As the symposium ended, and the final hymn echoed through the basilica's stone arches, the Pope remained in prayer. He didn't rush. He didn't wave to the crowd. He simply stood still. Eyes closed. Head bowed. Because he knows what many do not. The road ahead is hard. But the first step has already been taken. And heaven may already be listening. If the events of June 2025 marked the moment a spark was lit, then what lies ahead is the long, faithful work of tending that flame, patiently, prayerfully, and with the quiet courage that only those led by the Spirit can understand. Pope Leo XIV has opened a door. Now the question is, who will walk through it? Reconciliation is not a press release. It's not a photograph of two men in robes shaking hands. It's a process, a pilgrimage, and a deeply spiritual one. Even with goodwill on both sides, significant challenges remain. 1. Ecclesiology. What is the Church? Catholics and Orthodox both affirm apostolic succession, valid sacraments, and episcopal governance. But how those elements are structured remains a core tension. The Catholic Church teaches that the Pope has universal jurisdiction over all believers, as the successor of Peter. The Orthodox churches reject this notion. For them, the Bishop of Rome is first among equals, not a monarch but a brother. The theological dialogue must therefore address how primacy and synodality can coexist, how a model of leadership can be both unified and collaborative, global and local. And that will take time, humility, and a level of theological creativity that goes beyond legal definitions. It will require trust. 2. Doctrinal differences. Though much common ground has been found, some issues are still deeply contentious. The Immaculate Conception of Mary. The concept of purgatory. Papal infallibility. The development of doctrine over time. Pope Leo XIV is not rushing these discussions. His approach is more pastoral than polemical. He believes in starting where we agree, walking where we differ, and never forgetting whose church it is. One of the most promising signs is that the Pope has decentralized this process. He's not relying solely on high-level diplomacy. He's encouraging local churches, Catholic and Orthodox, to take small, intentional steps in their own communities. Across the world, these efforts are already taking shape. Greece. In Thessaloniki, a joint iconography workshop is bringing Catholic and Orthodox artists together to paint depictions of shared saints, including Gregory of Nazianzus, Basil the Great, and John Chrysostom. Italy. In Ravenna, young seminarians from both traditions are participating in a shared silence retreat, 7 days of fasting, silence, prayer, and study. United States. A joint Good Friday procession in New York City brought together over 5,000 Catholics and Orthodox believers, who carried a shared cross down Fifth Avenue, chanting the same ancient hymns in different languages. Romania. An ecumenical vigil for persecuted Christians around the world included clergy from both churches reading from the same gospel, each in their own chant style. The moment was live-streamed and watched by over 1 million people. These events may seem small, but in the eyes of heaven, they are seismic. Perhaps the most hopeful sign is the rising generation. Millennials and Gen Z Catholics and Orthodox are far less interested in the divisions of the past and far more concerned with authentic spirituality, real community, and a church that can stand united against a divided world. Pope Leo XIV knows this, and he's counting on them. That's why his Vatican office has just announced the launch of the New Pentecost Initiative, a multi-year ecumenical fellowship for young theologians, artists, writers, and social media creators from both traditions. We need young men and women, the Pope said, who don't just study theology, but live it, breathe it, sing it, and post it. The goal? To reimagine what unity looks like, not as uniformity, but as a symphony of sacred voices, each playing its part in harmony. Of course, not everyone is on board. Some voices on the Catholic right have accused Pope Leo of watering down doctrine and playing ecumenical politics. Certain Orthodox hardliners have warned of Rome's creeping influence and vowed never to accept papal primacy in any form. These reactions are expected, and Pope Leo has responded not with defensiveness, but with clarity. I do not ask for unanimity in every detail. I ask only that we not close the door before the Spirit has finished speaking. This is the mark of his leadership: conviction without coercion, vision without arrogance. Then, in an unexpected move, Pope Leo XIV made a surprise pilgrimage to Mount Athos. In Greece, the monastic republic that has long been seen as the beating heart of Eastern Orthodoxy. It was unprecedented. No pope in modern history had ever been allowed to visit. But Leo didn't go as a dignitary. He went as a pilgrim. He arrived barefoot. No cameras. No entourage. Just a walking staff and a request to pray in silence with the monks. He stayed for 48 hours. And though little is known about what happened inside the ancient chapels of Athos, one elder later said, he came not to conquer, but to weep. Photos later surfaced of the Pope kneeling before an icon of the Theotokos, Mother of God, his forehead pressed to the stone floor. The image went viral. And for many, it said more than 1,000 speeches ever could. With the Pope's proposal for a shared Easter in 2027 gaining quiet momentum, many are beginning to dream. What if, on Easter Sunday, April 4, 2027, the bells of Rome and the bells of Constantinople rang at the same hour? What if bishops from both churches stood shoulder to shoulder, lifting the same Eucharist to heaven? What if the world saw, not a church divided by dogma, but one risen in mercy? That vision isn't utopia. It's the prayer of Jesus. Father, may they be one, as you and I are one. Unity is not about strategy. It's about witness. Because a united church doesn't just benefit Christians. It blesses the world. It speaks healing to a fractured planet. It offers a model of dialogue in an age of outrage. It reminds us that beyond political borders, beyond ancient grudges, there is a deeper citizenship, the kingdom of God. And in that kingdom, there is no east or west. Only Christ. At his final public address on the topic in June, Pope Leo XIV ended with a moment of prayer. He didn't speak Latin or Greek. He simply whispered, Lord, let us love one another, not someday, but now. Not symbolically, but really. Not with suspicion, but with joy. And let the world see you through our love. The crowd was silent. But in the stillness, you could feel it. Something has shifted. Something is beginning. And though the road ahead is long, the first stone has been laid. This isn't just a religious event. It's a prophetic turning of the tide. From disunity to reconciliation. From rivalry to brotherhood. From ancient scars to shared resurrection. Pope Leo XIV may not live to see the full fruits of what he has begun. But he has planted a tree. And under its branches, future generations may finally gather together.